Hi, I'm Jeff Hartensveld, Regional Director for Asia Pacific, and welcome again to Go, a 40-day journey to the never reached. And I'm here with Brian Webb, missionary in Vanuatu and Pacific Oceania Area Director, and we are here to talk again about this Go imperative that we've been studying. And the second Go imperative that we're going to talk about in this study is, I think you said maybe one of your favorites and one of the favorites of people that wrote and contributed for the book, which was Go Tell. Last week we read Matthew 28, 1-7, and this week we're picking it up in Matthew 28 from verse 8. And here's what it says. I'm reading from the ESV. It says, "So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, 'Greetings.' And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me.'" Pretty clear we hear this go tell imperative coming out in this early story. And you know, one of the things, as we were talking in preparation for this study, Brian, you talked a little bit about, beside the great devotionals we have, that there's some competing narratives that probably started out there. So talk a little bit about the competing narratives and how that relates to society today, and maybe jump into some of the gleanings you had from the studies.
Well, it really addresses the importance of going and telling.
Yeah.
Why do we have to go and tell? If you continue reading that chapter, the next part of it is the report of the guard. So this was an incredible morning, right? I mean, the ground
Totally.
shakes, the tombstone is rolled away,
Right.
the guards fall down like dead men, the women come, they see the tomb is empty, and then while the women are gone, the guards also leave. Right. And they go to the chief priest. Here's the phenomenal thing about this story. Yeah. Probably the first people, besides the two women, who knew the full story of the resurrection was the chief priest.
Right.
Because the guard shows up and says, "Hey, we were standing there, the ground started shaking, the stone rolled away, an angel came down, Jesus walked out of the tomb." So that's phenomenal. These guys knew. How did they not believe?
Right.
How did they let their own self-interest get in the way? But the chief priest said, "Hey, we're going to give you a little bit of money here. Yeah. We're going to fix things with the governor. You go tell people that his disciples came." See, it's not that there's no competing story.
There was a different go tell all
That's
of a sudden
right.
that was
That's
there,
right. There's not a vacuum.
Right.
There's not a vacuum. There's a competing narrative. And if you read further, it says, and many of the Jews still believe this to this day.
Sure.
So,
That's right.
So in other words, that story got out there. Right. His disciples came and told the body. It affected how receptive people were to the gospel. Sure. See, we're not presenting the gospel in a spiritual vacuum, but Satan is actively promoting a different story. Right. You know, a while back I was in Chiang Rai, Thailand, and I went to the White Temple, and it is this depiction of heaven. It's the most macabre, loathsome, disgusting depiction of heaven you could imagine, because it starts in hell. Right. And the narrative is, everybody goes to hell. Wow. You can't escape. Wow. See, the guards didn't deny there was an empty tomb. Right. They just gave a different explanation.
And that was after they had seen the real thing.
That's right. That's right. Satan doesn't deny that there's a thing called hell. Right. He just gives a different story of it. Yeah. Everybody's got to go. You can work your way out. Yeah. The truth is, everybody doesn't have to go. Yeah. That's the incredible thing that we have to go and tell.
You know, and as we talk now about go tell a little bit more, you know, let's interact with some of the stories in the book, because a lot of times you hear this narrative out there among Christians that, well, I don't need to say anything. Yeah. I can just, as long as I act like a Christian, my actions speak louder than words. And there's some truth in that. And at the same time, talk now a little bit about the importance of actually telling it.
Yeah. Well, you know, if as you read the book, you'll notice that some of the devotions have no byline. And the reason is because we have people serving in countries that to mention their name, to mention the country they serve in, would put them and those they serve with at risk.
That's right.
And so one of our people wrote a story in a closed country.
Right.
It's Christmas time. They decide to decorate. There are no Christmas decorations available in this country. Nobody celebrates Christmas.
Right.
So they talk about using toilet paper rolls and stuff like that to decorate for Christmas.
Yeah.
And a teenage girl walks into their home, sees this and says, "What is this?
Yeah.
What is this?" You know, they're excited. There's a celebration. "Oh, we're celebrating Christmas." "Well, what is Christmas?"
Yeah.
"Well, it's the birth of Jesus." And the girl's response was, "Who is Jesus?"
Wow.
I mean, just now the story there that the missionary shares is how they were still learning language and they struggled to have the right words to be able to share this message. But the thing about it is, the only way a person can be transformed by this message is if they hear it.
Is if they hear it, right?
Yeah.
Let me read the quote real quick. This was from that particular person that shared. "We could be kind, hospitable, friendly, and compassionate, but without words, these people would remain never reached because the missionaries living next door were tongue-tied."
Yeah. And it really just drives at the heart of that idea of preach the gospel and if necessary, use words.
And if necessary,
Yeah. In a context where everybody knows the gospel, which that's not true of America anymore.
Yeah.
But in a context where everybody knows the gospel,
Yeah.
good works preached in their own way.
That's right.
But in a context where people don't know Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, you've got to tell them.
Yeah. It's hard to tell people I'm acting like a Christian when they don't even know what a Christian is.
That's right.
They don't even know how a Christian is supposed to act. And in many of the contexts of the never reached, good deeds and merit type actions are highly valued.
Right.
And of course the good news we're sharing.
But done
what we're
for
telling
kind of
is different.
a self-fulfilling reason, right?
That's right.
I'm doing this to
earn my way into something.
I'm earning my way out of hell. Yeah. And so we think of it as I'm showing who Jesus is, but the reality is they're interpreting it completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now let's just quickly talk about earlier we talked a little bit about fear. So part of this whole go tell thing is we get it. We've got to use words, but where does the fear factor come into this?
I think for every believer, fear has been a limiting factor. Like,
let me just say that in that scripture earlier, you saw that the women said they left in joy and fear.
Yeah.
So there was that element there. But go ahead.
And that's part of this whole thing, right? Is I'm afraid to share. As a matter of fact, Dan Betzer talks about how that fear will keep us from obedience. Yeah. We need to be reminded of the words of Jesus Christ. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, so good. Well, Dan's quote in the book was, "Fear keeps us from obedience, but Jesus told the women at the tomb, don't be afraid." And so there's almost this command of, not to be afraid. And yet, Brian, why do you think, and why do you think some of the writers that contributed to Go Tell talked about fear?
It's mentioned quite a few times, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a lot of times it's a concern of how are people going to receive me personally.
Yeah. Right.
And it is putting the priority on Christ and recognizing this message carries more weight than what people think about me personally.
So friends, as you're interacting just with, you hear Brian and I talking about it, but as you now begin to discuss this aspect of Go Tell, I think Brian said it so well when he said, this isn't just about people in foreign cultures, even here in the United States, to go and tell, or wherever you're studying this from. It could be an overseas church that's doing this too, but what in your context of Go Tell, discuss about the importance of using those words and telling that great story that really needs to get out there. So go, a 40-day journey to the never reached. Go and tell. God bless you guys.